Well, hello, fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts. Welcome to this episode 406 of your ICQ Amateur Radio podcast, supporting this episode by our monthly subscription donors. This episode is a special episode recorded at Ham Radio 2023 in Friedrichshafen at the announcement of license changes in the UK that Ofcom announced at the end of the week on the 23rd of June 2023. We sat down with Stuart Bryant, G3, Yankee Sierra X-Ray, the chairman of the RSGB, Steve Thomas, general manager, Mike 1, Alpha Charlie Bravo, and John McCurra, GI4, Bravo Whiskey Mike, who's the new president of the RSGB. First off, we got to meet John, obviously, and welcome him to his role in the RSGB presidential, position. And then we discussed, the proposed changes to the licensing conditions in the UK. And this great opportunity for people to, be part of the consultation process and have your say if you think these are good or bad, etc. So, as always, we hope you enjoy our informative and relaxed conversation with the guys in the RSGB. We'll head over to Martin, M1RB, who picks up the story.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Well, hi guys, we're at Friedrichshafen. We're taking a little bit of an outage, found a quiet area, well, relatively quiet area, and I've managed to find 3 people from the RSGB. Going round my table from right to left, I'm leaving John to the end because he's new. But I have Mr. Stuart Bryant, who's now the chairman of the RSGB, I believe.
Yes, I retired from being president and sort of got asked to be the chair for a while.
All right. Across the table for me is Mr. Steve Thomas, and you're the general manager, aren't you, Steve?
I am, yeah. Morning.
Morning. Shame we didn't bring Heather with you, but she's a lovely lady and she does try and keep me under control. So yeah, today might be interesting.
That's quite a job, though, isn't
Yeah,
it?
very much. As Hannah found out as well. And last but not least, we have John from our new president. And John, you're from Northern Ireland.
I am indeed, yeah.
And I have to apologise to you because I'd not met you until a few minutes ago. Congratulations on getting the job of president. And 2 years, is it? You're in the firing line?
2 years in the firing line,
Yeah.
I'm not entirely new to the RSGB, having been chairman of the ETCC for 12 years before, so fairly well aware and know a lot of people in the society and the volunteers, etc.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't get to your position if you didn't know a lot of people in the hobby.
Well, probably.
And as I say, it'll be an interesting role for you, I'm sure. As Stuart's probably clued you in. And
I'm finding that out every day.
Yeah.
Oh, and we're very lucky to have John who stood up for this job.
Yeah. And I assume you'll be hopping back over the RSC every now and again to see us.
I think we will.
Yeah.
Luckily, it's quite an easy hop.
Yeah. Well, I'd suggest you fly rather than come over on the ferry from Belfast, because it's a 12-hour crossing or something silly.
No, it's not.
Oh, when I went out there last year, it was 12 hours or something.
If you take the right route, it's 2.25 hours. But then you drive through Scotland.
Ah, right. Yeah, well, that would have probably been quicker.
You probably crossed to Birkenhead.
I did,
which takes overnight, during the day.
Yeah, but it was an interesting trip and an enjoyable trip, and we spent some time in Northern Ireland. I operated as GI.
Good.
Sorry. MI. But, I enjoyed that very much so. So, yeah.
Where did you visit, can I ask?
Yeah, you can. We went to Belfast as a staging point. Colin, my eldest son, M6BOY, lives in Southern Ireland, so he came up and we met with the family in Northern Ireland. You come over the border, no problems. And we went up to the Giant's Causeway.
And Bushmills, no doubt?
Probably. It was a very quick few days over, but we packed a lot in. But I remember the Giant's Causeway. I remember lots of places where everybody got excited because they filmed part of Games of
Of course.
Thrones here and this there.
The Dark Hedges and all those.
Yeah, those sort of
places,
things.
yeah.
So it was an interesting, very quick trip. We had a great afternoon cup of tea and a cake, as you always do in Ireland, at a lovely little fishing village, which was absolutely picturesque, and all sorts of things like that. So it was a very relaxing, quick few minutes.
Well, they're always welcome, anytime.
Yeah, thank you. At least I can operate over there, and so can Colin.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think we got together the big news story of today, and this is the big one. Ofcom have made some interesting announcements and put out a document for discussion. I'm going to ask the question, and it's a loaded question. Did you guys have anything to do with organising this, or is this an Ofcom thing?
Well, it's, so as the National Society, we work with Ofcom all the time. Right? So we like to think that we've had some influence in letting Ofcom know what modern radio amateurs want to do and what parts of the licence might get in their way. But we do that every day of the week. Right? So I think this is a culmination of a lot of work that we do with Ofcom. But we knew that they wanted to simplify the licensing rules, but there's an opportunity there to bring it in line with what UK radio amateurs would like as well. So I think it's a combination of a lot of work that's been going on for years.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the hobby, nearly 25 years. I'm a youngster for a lot of people. But there have been a fair number of changes in that last 25 years. It is organic almost. It changes as time goes on. There's a lot of big changes, of which, okay, Stuart's going to beat me up in a minute for not reading the 110-page document and digesting it all. But there are some interesting things in there, some of which are going to excite people, some of which people go, so what? Some of which will probably cause a bit of aggravation amongst people. I can understand why. The one, for argument's sake, do I become ME1 MRB? It's optional, but it's a very woke sort of thing of bringing us in line. Why should the people be MW or MM? So I can understand. It's trying to make a level playing field, would you say?
Well, you could not use your national identifier at all. That's also allowed. So if you just want to use plain UK identifier, as you do with, for example, GB calls, you're at liberty to do that in these new rules. But then that gets in the way of DXCC.
Yeah.
And we know that a lot of people that use the RSLs now are very passionate about using them because it gives them a national identity.
Absolutely.
So it is very definitely a topic for discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I was just throwing that one in because and I had a very silly moment just before I went to sleep last night, and it was a very silly moment, guys, and it probably isn't going to happen. But our special event stations are GB and number XXX. Yeah. Driving out here, I was told my GB sticker on my car is no longer allowed. I had to change it to a UK.
Yeah.
Is there any move to make it UK?
Not that we know of.
Anyway, the people who own UK would probably object.
That's right. Yeah.
Which country is that?
Ukraine.
Yeah, right.
So everything that's in that consultation document is what's on the table now. But there is some simplification in the special event call sign area as well. I don't know if you spotted that.
Yeah, we had
but there is some things that Ofcom are proposing there as well to try and simplify things again. That's the overriding theme through this. It's simplifying the administration overhead that Ofcom might have, but trying to take away all the sort of mysterious things that have been included in the licence over the years, And in some cases, people can't understand why they were there in the first place, or either Ofcom or very often ourselves spent a lot of time trying to explain what the license meant. So this is a simplification of that, as well as Ofcom, I think, trying to smooth their administration role.
And they're rereading their software as well, their licensing software, and obviously they want to keep it as simple as possible as well.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I remember, and this could be something we, as amateurs around the table here, push for. You know, I teach the foundation intermediate course, saying I would do the full if we could get the hall long enough. When I came into the hobby, it wasn't Ofcom, it was the Radio Authority, and you had 3 licensing documents, and they were written a lot clearer so that a foundation license holder knew they could do this and this, and then you got the next license, you read that book and you could do this and this. Whereas today we have one license book.
Do you mean BR68? Are you going back?
Back to BR68,
BR68,
BR68 was far easier to understand from somebody new coming into the hobby. Whereas the current documentation, for argument's sake, on maritime mobile, 1 minute it says all amateurs allowed mobile. So if the person doesn't get past that page, and they should, obviously, and then about 10 pages further in it says, oh, you can only do that if you're a full license holder. But it's...
There's the license terms and conditions that you can download from the Ofcom website now, and then there's a document that explains the license terms and conditions. But that's a really good illustration of why they want to simplify it. To try and reduce that complexity.
Well, that is their goal, isn't it? I mean, in particular, maritime mobile, I'm sure that all the complexity around that will just disappear.
Yeah, and it probably should. I mean, in fairness, you ask the ship's master, can I do it? And he'll say, yes, no.
That's what it says in the new consultation document. I think you can only do it if you're full, but they don't really care what the suffix is anymore.
And in fairness, the suffixes hasn't been mandatory for a good few years, has it?
No.
So lots of things haven't been mandatory. You still get the old boys, of which I'm becoming one very quickly, that will argue, you don't do this, or you're supposed to do that, the other. And I've had this discussion about, you've got to give your call sign every 15 minutes. No, you haven't. I mean, we've got a repeater. We've got a repeater that is a analog and digital. It can't give a K tone, and it can't give its ident every so many minutes. So we have to program that in. But there's certain things we're moving on and think, you're right, changes.
So I think a lot of this is technology that's done this. So it used to be that you had to give your location and your call sign regularly, because that was the only way they could find out who you were and where you were. Modern DFing technology is so efficient now that if they want to know where your station is, it's relatively easy to find.
Well, just as a quick aside, I know Chris was driving down here with his camper van. Going off at the side, you guys may not be aware of it. We have a digital talk group.
Oh, I'm aware of it. I've been on it.
All right. I know. I've worked on it. Well, Chris was chatting to one of our Australian listeners, driving through Europe, but Chris was also beaconing APRS for him, and he was tracking it.
And it's a really interesting point, because some of our discussions with Ofcom that we have all the time is all about what modern radio amateurs want to do, and what they would like to do, and is there other things in the license that stop them doing that. That's a really good thing to bear in mind as you read the document, I think. We're back to those two things, the admin and the simplification of it, but where radio amateurs can benefit from that if they read the consultation is by looking for the things that help them or stop them, depending on how they view the consultation, doing what they want to do. And that's a really good mindset, I think, as you go through. Now, we are going to produce some guidance. I mean, remember, we saw the document for the first time yesterday as well. But we're going to produce some guidance as to what we think, the right mix is. But everybody should reply to this consultation individually.
I think so.
Ofcom are taking input from all radio amateurs at this stage.
Yeah. This, as you say, this is important that everybody who has a license respond to Ofcom. And I'm going to put my neck on the line and say, regardless whether you're an RSGB member or not, you've got to do this because when we talked about power line problems, I think there's only about 3 people ever bothered to say to Ofcom they had power line problems. We know there's power line problems out there. You can't sit around and do nothing.
Yeah.
Is where I'm going on that one.
This is definitely an opportunity for radio amateurs, all radio amateurs in the UK, to comment on this document.
Yeah. Now, there's some nice things in here that certainly foundation licence holders and intermediates are going to thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah.
I believe there's some power increases.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
So I believe I believe foundation licence holders are getting a maximum of 20 watts.
You have
Go
to
on.
be careful because they're not. It's 1 watt on the gigahertz bands. They've just been allocated 20 watts elsewhere.
Yeah, but there's always been a slight. You're right there. There's always been on a couple of frequencies they didn't have 10 watts, from my memory. But their maximum, or let's say the maximum power on some of the bands will be
They
20.
didn't used to have 2.4 and 5.
They didn't. No.
And those are quite important bands to have allocated. For example, QO100 uplink is on 2.4.
4, yeah. So it's nice we'll bring them into line.
Yeah.
The other one is, I believe, intermediates are going to have a maximum of 100 watts,
Yes.
depending on where.
Yeah.
Yes, it's 100 watts.
Back
Yeah.
to 3 dB for the both. It's
Yeah.
3 dB increase for both, yeah.
And being a QRP operator, I'm going to sleep here. I believe full licence holders are potentially going to be given a kilowatt.
Yeah.
On some
bands,
bands.
that-
On some
bands
bands.
where we've got a primary allocation.
Yeah.
And where we've got a secondary allocation, it's still 400.
400.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
less, depending on.
Yeah.
On the
And
plan.
I hold a full US license, 1.5 kilowatts, and I think I've used a maximum of 5 watts when I've been in the States. So it's not something that's going to.
No.
But for people that are interested, and it's good.
But the really important thing here is everybody's got to remember the EMF calculations as well, right? So that might be the limiting factor. It's more likely to be the limiting factor for a lot of stations. So the EMF calculation still applies. So you have to work out whether it's actually safe to operate at those levels.
And I think it was the EMF introduction of the EMF stuff that allowed them to think about going above 400 watts.
Yeah.
And we really have to thank the work of the EMC committee for the outstanding work they did in making it easy for anyone to do their EMF calculation.
Yeah, so RSGB EMC committee
Yes.
works with Ofcom very closely on how to actually measure fields, and then created the software that is now available on our website for everybody. So not just RSGB members, but for everybody. That's just to help amateurs do the calculations necessary. But that is hugely important with these power level changes.
John, I haven't involved you very much in it. What excites you the most about this new announcement by Ofcom?
Probably the change in NOVs or the lack of NOVs. We're wait to see how that works out, but it would appear, for instance, 5 watt gateways generally don't need an NOV, etc. Temporary repeaters. So it'd be interesting to see how that works out and make sure that we don't get a complete free for all. That's the main thing. Though there still will be coordination, especially for the high power repeaters. So looking carefully at those sorts of things. But those are very interesting because it changes the way we do things.
Certainly does. I mean, there's NOVs. If I remember right, I don't do much HF, but at 60 metres. There's NOV at 2 metres from 146 to 147.
Those will remain. That's just
They're
the same. Yes.
Yeah.
So
And there's one for 4 metres as well,
4
at
metres,
70.5 upwards.
and above,
The extended 4 metre band.
Yeah.
Those will remain. Those NOVs remain.
Yeah.
In the application process,
There's-
we think will just.
Yeah, but in the future there's no guarantee that we'll actually get those those allocations extended, because Ofcom always do it on a yearly renewal basis, so we never know in advance.
And
whether
146 and upward is prime spectrum, so
it is.
it may well disappear at some point.
Yeah.
But it's been a great place for people to experiment. There's been a lot of digital activity in that space.
Well, digital ATVs
Yes.
have been going very well there. Yeah.
So it's some interesting times. I'm sure.
There's another one in there that I really want
Go
to
on.
mention, I think, which I really hope people like, and that's the supervised operation, right? Because there's a tremendous opportunity. There's been confusion in there for years. You know, the old idea that you have to be in control of the radio and somebody can pass a greetings message, but you're holding the mic. It's always caused lots of discussion, isn't it, about what the regulation actually means. And now they're saying that you can actually supervise somebody else using the radio. So we've got an opportunity for scout events and STEM events and anything just to introduce people to radio.
And you can put them on the microphone. They can use the PTT themselves. They can do everything you could do under your supervision.
Which is absolutely great, because that's exactly what the American license does with their go-to stations at field day. That means we can do very similar things.
Yes.
It also means I can make Mrs. B operate.
There we go.
And she doesn't want to.
But I think that opens up outreach activities, doesn't it, for everybody? Clubs doing it, individuals doing it, whatever. It just allows us to show people amateur radio.
It certainly does, because in many ways, amateur radio used to be quite strange. In that, if I wanted to learn how to fly a plane, I flew the plane with an instructor. If I want to learn to drive, I drive the car with an instructor. But I do all the work with the instructor supervising. And then you got amateur radio. You can't do it unless you've got a license, which is kind of silly in this day and age.
Well, it's bringing that all into line with modern practice.
So that's the good thing, I think, on that one. So
Aeronautical?
Aeronautical.
Aeronautical, yeah. I did have a number of students that joined the class thinking they could do aeronautical. One of them was flying model planes, and I can do amateur radio with it. Blah, blah, blah. ATV and cameras.
Angulator people.
Yeah.
And
But there's a
high
half-watt
altitude
restriction.
high altitude balloons and things like that as
There's
well.
a half-watt restriction, though, on aero.
Well, you're not going to get everything straight away.
No.
Let's be sensible about it.
It goes a long way. Half a watt. goes
Oh,
a long way.
yeah. 10 milliwatts goes a long
A
way.
long way.
So there is just this discussion we've had for however long it's been. It just shows there is so much in this document that people need to go and read.
Yeah. I mean, we're only going to scratch the surface today,
absolutely.
in fairness. But I think it's a positive time for amateur radio.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we could get more people into the hobby.
Yep.
Oh, there's a huge scope for getting more people into the hobby. The 4x4 people, for example. You can imagine putting up a temporary repeater for them to do their exercises. There are so many things you can imagine doing with other groups and getting them interested in amateur radio, and hopefully getting them to become radio amateurs themselves.
I think so. But and this is the big but, boys, and it's not round this table, but we do have a lot of people in our hobby, and if you're listening, guys, it might be you, who put off the foundation license holders, who rip them straight away. Guys,
You and I have talked about this many times. haven't we?
guys, it's a hobby. We should be fun. If a foundation license holder is not operating correctly, do not shout at them. Politely advise them. Help them.
The very
Nobody's
best thing you can do is welcome them into amateur radio, and then they might stay.
nobody's going to die
No.
if they don't issue their correct course, or they get the course on all fumbled up.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm sorry to say this, boys, round this table, if you three were on calling CQ and there was an M7, I'd work the M7 first.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they need the practice. They've got to they've got the fire in their belly.
I think I've said to you before, the best contacts I have is when somebody says, "Oh, this is my very first contact."
Yeah.
Right? That's it. That's a result, and I'm holding up the pile up or whatever at that point,
Yeah.
and having a good chat with them.
Why not?
It's
And
what
we
you need to do.
and we do all those things, and it's good for the hobby.
Yeah.
So
And don't criticise people for things that are not important. I mean, I made thousands of mistakes when I was learning, and if it's not important, then they'll gradually learn anyway.
yeah, I mean the thing is nowadays we don't have to issue our call sign at the end of every over.
No.
I still, when I teach, I will talk to foundation licensors. I say, look, you don't have to do it. However, if you want to get contacts with somebody outside the UK who English may not be their first language, they understand there is a set protocol of their call sign, your call sign at the end of an over.
Yeah.
So if they lose the track of what you're saying, they know you've passed it back to them.
Yeah, it's good practice.
It's good practice. And I said, and if you get into that practice, there's no reason why you shouldn't do that on VHF or UHF or a repeater. What's the problem?
This is all about welcoming people into amateur radio, though, isn't it? That where we were all welcomed when we started, and we've got to do exactly the same and look for even more people, because there's, especially with the new license changes that are coming along, it may be easier to introduce it to people. We've then got the existing amateur community have then got to welcome those people that come.
Oh, yes.
Right, we really have.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we will suffer in the future.
Yeah. I heard it a long time ago in that it's very, very... when I did my licence, it was very much different. It was difficult. I had to write X pages. And I turn around to people and say, I don't care what you did.
No.
Today, you have to do this.
Yeah.
It's no good bitching about it's different. Today's this. Very quickly, and I'm going off at a tangent, but very quickly, I got stuck to do a club presentation many years ago. We got let down at the last minute. Very let down at the last minute. So we turned up at the club, and I said, I'll organise a quiz evening. And I got my foundation questions out.
Yeah.
And foundation examples. And we said, right, split yourself into groups, and all the G3s went sat in one corner of G4s, and all the foundation licenses over here, and this is going to be a piece. First question went up on the board. What's that all about? I start hearing from some people, because the hobby's moved on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
By 3 questions in, the groups have reorganised.
Yeah.
Like the boys had grabbed the foundation license in, which was great.
Yeah.
And then, by about question 8, it turned into a total giggle. There was a block diagram of a receiver on the board, and it said, I can hear lots of stations at the same time. Is it the audio amplifier, the detector, or the oscillator, or the front end? And some bright spark shouts from the back, there's an 80-metre contest on. But it degenerated into a giggle.
Yeah.
But what that did for our club, was it gave respect for all licenses.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, nobody got upset with the foundation license holder. And I think that's, people have to understand it's a different time.
Yeah.
But in a way, there's nothing new under the sun. I remember as a very young new GI4 coming on the air, and like everyone else, you were very keen and you did a lot of operating, you're on, and a guy coming on, an older G3, saying, oh, he's never off the air and all the rest of it. Just like we do, some people do with the foundation licensees now. And someone else came on and said, you shouldn't do that. And actually he was told off rather than me. So in a way, there's young people and new call signs coming in there tend to get criticised. And simply because they're keen.
Good on them.
Indeed. Let them operate.
Yeah.
That's what's wrong. I think people are frightened because of that.
We hear some fantastic stories when people take the exams, because we get to, we send the certificate to them when they pass and everything like that. And that is when they are most enthusiastic. They've just passed the exam. So that's the point where they need help, support. And more encouragement to carry on.
And if they could trodden on, they go off and never
Yeah,
come back on.
of course they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when they just pass their license, they want to do DC to light on every band in every mode and whatever.
Yeah.
And you have to quietly take them aside and say, you have limitations where you live, your garden is only 4 foot long or whatever.
I think that's one side, but there's another side that to pass the exam and then wonder what they've got to do next.
Yeah.
Right. So they bought a handheld. What else can I do? And we know that there's a whole world of activities that you can do, and sometimes just helping people through finding what their niche is going to be.
Yeah,
'Cause you do find that, don't you? Over the years, you find a niche, and then it might change in a few years.
We've
But-
all moved on. Yeah.
But helping people when they first come in as to what they might want to do or what they might want to try is a really big
Yeah.
thing
There's
that
more to
people can
life
do.
than a cheap handheld.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I say, I've spoken to lots of people. There is a big market, and I know we're going major off topic, and this is really a discussion.
Well,
But
just by way of a change. Right?
yes, we always do, Steve. But in fairness, if one of my big bugs about doing not special event stations but demonstration stations, you go to a fete, right?
I know where you're going.
You do, because we've had this discussion many times. But you go to a big fete and somebody will put an amateur radio station on. There'll be two old boys sitting there screaming and hollering at the rig with their back to the public.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what then happens is, if you're a parent with a young child and you walk down the aisle and you look at this and you look at £2,000-3,000 worth of gear sitting on the table, and little Johnny goes, I want to do that, or his sister does, and you're going, hang on a minute, they got the retention, they get bored with that in a month. I'm not spending that sort of money on it. We're better off at demonstration events having something like a Baofeng UV5R, and I know I'm going to get 3 million emails over that, but something in that cost bracket and working a repeater, because people's ears are tuned into VHF and FM transmission. They're not tuned into sideband, so it's just a noise to them. And
Well, we have this very much at the National Radio Centre in Bletchley, that we've got a high-end station there as well, so we can demonstrate that you can talk to people the other side of the world. But we've also got satellite systems, so you can actually see that, and we've got a repeater running there as well, so you can see that, and we've got some beginners level equipment so they can see that. But I think the very most important thing we do is we have people there to talk to the visitors. So if there is somebody operating the station, that's an interesting background, but they get the most out of the interaction with somebody there who's talking and describing what's going on, and answering questions. That's the bit that we find really gets people's attention. So you can be attracted by the flashing lights and the long distance stuff, but actually having the opportunity to ask somebody and talk about it and tune the conversation to what they're interested in.
oh yeah,
Because we never know who's going to walk through that door. And on busy days at the NRC, we see 500 people a day.
Yeah.
Right. So you never know whether they were involved in something at Bletchley, or they've got a radio history, or they're completely new to it.
yeah.
But having somebody to talk to them and answer questions is where I thought you were going to go with the special event station.
Well, that as well, but
very definitely. But it's got to be tuned, doesn't it, to the person who might have an interest in something which isn't necessarily what you're showing, but there's still an opportunity to talk to.
And I think that the video game aspect of some of the things like FT8, which I know a lot of people dislike, but it is just like playing a video game, and a lot of people who are new to amateur radio are used to playing video games.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like what I'm doing at the moment with the digital group of bringing people together. Yeah, I'm told by a lot of people that ain't real radio.
Yeah.
Am I having fun? Am I using a radio? Yes.
All right.
As far as
Do I
I'm concerned,
care? No.
as far as I'm concerned, if there's a photon involved, it is radio.
Yeah.
And in fact, what you do, you remember we're in the press centre, aren't we?
Yeah.
So what you do is different to what the traditional press was, wasn't it? When press started, newspapers, everything like that. But you're here in the press centre because what you do is the modern version.
Yeah.
That is a really good analogy with amateur radio, I think.
Yeah. So that was a good one. Listen, we're going off at a tangent, and I know you got other things to do later on. Very quickly, let's go back to the original announcement. Anything you really want to cover that I've missed?
I don't think so. We covered aeronautical, didn't we, at the end?
We did.
There are some things in there about licensing and people holding call signs that is going to take a bit of reading, I think, a bit more reading. That's all about simplifying the number of licenses that are held. That's a bit that I think, I don't want to use the word contentious, but I think there will be varying views or differing views on that. So the number of call signs, you can only hold one call sign. An individual can hold one call sign at one license level. And you may have to choose which one you keep if you've got 2 or 3 full licenses for some reason. And there's things about being able to change your call sign. There's all sorts of things in the call sign allocation that I think
prefixes for instance, the M.
Yes, that's right. M8 and M9 for the intermediate, for instance. But the call sign area, I think there'll be differing views, and I think that's an important thing for people to focus on.
There is things in that, and in fairness, as much as people get upset, one call sign's enough. If you
more for clubs, of course. I think clubs can
five. So, I mean, one call sign's enough. If I want to be a QRP operator, I can still use a full license call sign. Why do I have to hold a foundation license?
There's something we haven't really talked about, and it was a surprise to us, I think, which is that foundations can now build things. And we talked about the excitement of your first contact. It wasn't the first contact that excited me. It was the fact that first contact was on a radio that I had built from components. And I think this gives us an opportunity to get people who are just into radio into that excitement that we used to have, which is, if you've got a license, I've built this from a pool of bits, be that hardware these days, or in those days, or software now, and you can have all the excitement of that contact with that thing that you constructed yourself.
I mean, okay, I'm going off at a tangent this way. There are people in this hobby that are foundation license holders who are far more technical than me and far cleverer than me. And I'm being honest about this. I've taught them. And they get they're bored out of their brains, but their company said, you go get an amateur radio license. And I've said, I've got to teach you the syllabus. However, I think it really does come down to the individual. If you feel comfortable, if you have the knowledge, then you should build. And this is going to be a difficult one to legislate. If you have no knowledge and you can't solder, and for God's sake don't look at YouTube, because 90% of people on YouTube can't solder, you've got to accept that there will be some who can do it. And I've met some full licensees who should never be allowed to build a radio. And I'm not... So it's a difficult one. It's a very exciting one. But all I say to people...
Remember I said this is about taking away the barriers and the complexity. So instead of having to try to find some kit that relates to IR 2028 regulations, that's gone. Right? It's just simple now. You can build things. So we're back to the exams being there just to make sure that you are safe. Safe to experiment, safe to operate, that sort of thing. And that's what we're back to. We're back to the basics.
And I think if a person is not competent or not confident in their ability of building something, if they're unsure or they don't have the test gear to check for things like harmonics and that, the clubs are the ideal thing. There's always somebody in a club that can help you.
So absolutely, clubs are a great resource. And the other big difference is when we were all first licensed, spectrum analyzer was the gold standard. You could never ever have dreamt about it. Now £70 will buy you a perfectly respectable spectrum analyzer that can tell you whether you're in band or not.
The tiny SA, lovely.
Yeah, I mean, and we know the trajectory of test equipment is to drive down the costs, and so a lot of the barriers, I didn't have an oscilloscope until for ages. Now they're cheap as chips.
Yeah, but I remember when I came into the hobby, you had to have an absorption wave meter to prove that you hadn't got the harmonics. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now that was 25 years ago.
Testing your emissions from time to time.
Time to
Yeah.
time, yes.
Yeah. So, lots of these things have gone by the wayside, but as you say, I think the most important thing is simplification. And in fairness, as long as you're not causing interference out of the band and potentially not causing interference to people, your own colleagues in the band, everybody's going to leave you alone in many ways. And it's a matter of educating people in that scheme. Yeah.
So we're looking forward to finding out what people actually think about the consultation. Because we saw the document for the first time when it was published
Yesterday,
right? But as I said, we talk to Ofcom all of the time, so we like to think there's some influence that's gone all the way through the last X number of years that's gone into this. But the feedback we've seen, and you've probably been watching it as well since yesterday when it was published, is predominantly positive. Right? People have seen lots of things. They say mostly positive. I'm a bit concerned about this area, and
there will be areas where every one of us round this table could pick a hole in it and say that doesn't suit me. What we have to look at is generally as radio amateurs, this document appears to be a major step forward and a very positive major step forward. The language it's written in is very positive towards amateur radio.
Indeed.
I know that Ofcom are probably trying to save money. Once again, very fair. And let's be honest, we don't pay for our licence. In other countries you do, and so we can't complain about a very positive document, in fairness.
But Ofcom do take amateur radio seriously, and we have that relationship with them as the National Society, which is a very privileged position, I have to say. But they do discuss things with us. We absolutely do lobby them on all sorts of subjects, and they take notice. This is part of the result of that. It really is.
And we try and support every aspect of the hobby. No special interests. We're interested in trying to assist everyone to enjoy amateur radio and to learn about technology and to learn about operating.
It's all about enjoyment.
Yes.
And the future of amateur radio, I think it helps that.
I do.
It future-proofs it, it does.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
You are very welcome.
As I say, it's a pleasant little chat in this area. It's I know you'll be out on the floor in a minute amongst all of us. But thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to thank Stuart.
Thank you for having us.
I'd like to thank Steve.
Thank you.
And John.
Thank you, Mark.
And it's a pleasure. John, you're coming on board as a team.
Thank you.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.